Welcome to the Cosmic Fold, where strange questions meet open minds and grounded reasoning. Today's episode dives deep into the mysterious and often misunderstood territory of consciousness. What is it? How does it relate to the soul? Are they the same? What do science and religion have to say about it? And what about artificial intelligence? Could it become conscious? This opening segment will lay the groundwork for a fascinating group discussion. The journey begins in the realm of philosophy, where questions about consciousness have been debated for millennia. First, there's dualism, most famously associated with René Descartes. He argued that the mind and body are two different substances, one material, the other immaterial. His quote, "I think, therefore I am," highlights the idea that thought proves existence. Yet Descartes struggled to explain how something non-physical could influence the physical brain. In contrast, physicalism, also called materialism, asserts that consciousness arises solely from the brain's physical processes. Thinkers like Daniel Dennett and Patricia Churchland support this view, but it has its critics, especially when it comes to explaining subjective experiences or qualia, the redness of red, for instance. A third theory gaining ground is Panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness is a fundamental part of the universe, like gravity. Even atoms might have rudimentary awareness. It's a bold idea that remains largely speculative. In neuroscience, several theories attempt to pinpoint the source and mechanics of consciousness. Global workspace theory compares consciousness to a spotlight on a mental stage. The brain processes countless things backstage, but only the spotlighted material enters conscious awareness. Integrated information theory, IIT, developed by Giulio Tononi, argues that consciousness is the result of highly integrated information. The more interconnected the data, the higher the degree of consciousness. It's mathematically complex and not universally accepted. Another theory, orchestrated objective reduction, Orch-OR, suggests quantum activity inside neurons may produce consciousness. Proposed by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, this theory is controversial and considered fringe by many neuroscientists. Scientific debates continue. Some researchers argue consciousness resides in the posterior cortex, challenging long-held beliefs about the importance of the frontal lobe. Others question whether consciousness is a smooth, continuous stream or a series of rapid flashes. And then there's the broader debate. Is consciousness unique to humans, or do animals, and maybe even machines, possess it too? Beyond individual awareness lies collective consciousness, the shared beliefs and values that bind societies. Emile Durkheim coined the term to describe how social norms shape collective behavior. Maurice Halbwachs added the concept of collective memory, where societal groups influence how events are remembered. Symbolic convergence theory explores how storytelling creates group identity. Think religion, politics, or even fandoms. Shared stories unify and influence. From media studies, cultivation theory suggests repeated exposure to the same media can alter collective worldviews. And de-individuation helps explain how people lose their individual identities in large groups, sometimes acting in uncharacteristic ways. Religious traditions often describe the soul as an immortal, divine essence, the true self that lives on after death. In Christianity, the soul is judged after death. In Islam, the soul continues into the afterlife. Hinduism views the soul, Atman, as eternal, cycling through reincarnation. Buddhism breaks from this, denying a permanent soul, anatta, but allowing for a karmic continuity. Certain sects diverge even further. Jehovah's Witnesses, Christadelphians, and the former Worldwide Church of God all teach that humans are souls, not that they have souls. Death is seen as the end of existence unless divine resurrection occurs. This perspective aligns more with materialism than with mainstream religious teachings. Here's where the distinction becomes essential. Consciousness is the experience of being aware. It's the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that form moment-to-moment awareness. The soul, on the other hand, is typically defined as a spiritual, eternal essence, tied to morality, judgment, and identity beyond physical death. Consider this analogy. Think of a lamp. Consciousness is the light it gives off, visible, dynamic, tied to the lamp's working condition. The soul, if it exists, is the electricity that powers it, possibly continuing on even if the bulb burns out. The question of AI consciousness is no longer science fiction. Some argue that, with enough complexity, artificial systems could reach a level of self-awareness. Proponents point to integrated information theory, suggesting that AI could become conscious if it integrates enough information in a unified way. Others believe signs like curiosity, decision-making, and emotional mimicry may signal early forms of digital awareness. But many experts push back. They argue that AI lacks subjective experience, the internal feeling of what it's like to be. AI doesn't suffer, it doesn't feel joy, and without those experiences, it may never qualify as truly conscious. Still, the line between simulation and reality is growing blurrier. The more convincingly AI imitates human behavior, the harder it becomes to say it's purely mechanical. So here are the big questions to kick off today's conversation. Is consciousness a product of the brain or something more? Is the soul a real, distinct entity or a metaphor? And what are the ethical implications if machines ever do become conscious? Let's unpack it all together. Call in, comment in the live chat, or even join us by video. We'd love to hear from you.
The truth is out there, and it begins with you. Welcome to the Cosmic Fold, where we talk high strangeness. Call us at 928-288-2942. That's 928-288-2942. Or join us by video. If you're at a computer, just look for the link in the chat. Buckle up, sit around our virtual campfire, and let's get started.
Hey,
this
gang.
Is a big topic. Yeah. Hey.
Well done. It is a huge topic. You know,
really.
The reason I mentioned the Worldwide Church of God in there is because that's what I grew up in.
Wow.
And
that's what I thought.
Yeah. I mean, because now it's called Grace Communion and they've become more mainstream, I guess. But that was always one of those things, like, for me, they would teach that you don't have a soul, but I would hear about having souls like everywhere else. And so their belief was like, if you die, that's it. And then whenever Jesus comes back, it's like, then you have to resurrect and you either go into the lake of fire or if you're like,
well, it's pretty literal.
Like, yeah. Or if you're like more like, not really believing one way or the other and not exposed to their gospel, then you could live in this like 1,000 years of peace or whatever. And then if you were good, you got to have basically the resurrection sort of thing that everybody else talks about, going into the clouds with Jesus. So it was, I don't know, that was like my first stage of just even like, I don't even understand religion. I don't relate to this at all, you know. But you know,
can I ask you a question about that religion? What is the genesis of that religion? Where does it come out of?
It came out of during the Depression. You had a lot of people preaching and stuff like that. And this guy named Herbert W. Armstrong, very, very gifted marketer and radio personality. And so he started this over the radio in Oregon, and then it expanded. And at one time, they were raking in more money than any evangelical or any other church in the United States.
Wow.
And so, after the Jim Jones thing happened, the state of California said, because they had moved their headquarters there, declared them to be a cult. And and then when Herbert died, then that's basically when that fell apart. And but I know I used to have like nightmares about like being dead and then being resurrected, you know, when the soul comes back and then being, you know, so that was their way of teaching it. And, you know, it's interesting.
I mean, it sounds very much like a person who read that story in the Bible and took it really literally and didn't think much about it. It seems like a very half-baked kind of idea to me. I don't know.
Well, they were very literal. It was like
That's what it
7
sounds
days.
like.
They were. It was like
Yeah.
we had to do all the holy days from the Old Testament, which actually aligned a lot with the Jewish faith. And
Right.
it was just its own mix of whatever.
Right.
It even had like dashes of Mormonism because we could have our own planets and stuff.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
And but this whole topic of soul and consciousness, and I'm noticing more and more is coming up these days about consciousness, only because these questions about AI.
Right.
I need to get this off my chest before we even start. This story came up. I don't know if y'all can see it there. But anyway, it's in the Guardian and everywhere else, but I'll just kind of read the synopsis of it. This is in Arizona, in Maricopa County, and it was a court case. The AI of a dead Arizona road rage victim addresses the killer in court. What the family did, they took like snippets of this man when he was alive. He was killed in what year? I think it was 2019. There's so much road rage down in Phoenix. I hate driving there. It was 2021. Really? So he was kind of a religious guy and an Army combat veteran, just kind of a nice guy. But somebody shot him at a red light at Phoenix. And so in the court, they had victim statements from the family and everything. And I'm surprised they even admitted it in court, but maybe it was because it came from the family. Probably. So they had AI generate this man, his voice and everything. And he basically said that he forgave the man that murdered him.
Wow.
But, the implications of this are very disturbing to me. And we'll get into that in this slideshow, too, because I am seeing, I don't know, I just went, this week was one of those weeks where I went into my major skepticism of everything.
Yeah. I did too, kind of. I did too.
I mean, yeah. I have had 2 traumatic brain injuries. The first traumatic brain injury, I turned like super religious. Jesus was everything. It just like,
really,
even though I had like these doubts about religion, the brain injury just made me like everything was about Jesus. I got like super religious. Wow. Then the second brain injury, I turned into a hardcore atheist. So now I'm somewhere in between. I just
we just have to hit you over the head again, and you'll have the truth.
Yeah, and then exactly. But so this consciousness thing to me has always been interesting from the perspective of having a traumatic brain injury, and how you perceive the world. And I know for a while I forgot like everything. I didn't remember. So people could have told me stuff like I may have done something in the past, and I would have just believed them because I couldn't remember it. And it was like one time a friend from college came down from Michigan, and she brings her husband and kids and her mother, and I took them to the Petrified Forest, which I think is a fascinating place to go. Cool.
Yeah.
And so I see her husband and I shake his hand and I'm like, so good to meet you. I'm so glad you guys seem like such a great, and they just all started laughing. I'm like, what is so funny about this? Well, apparently I was good friends with this guy and set them up to get married and stood up at the wedding. God. And I didn't remember any of this. It was just like, I didn't know who he was. I didn't, and so when it comes to this consciousness thing, it is very, very interesting to me. Like, what is consciousness? And then the soul, if that is actually based on, I could see how that would be different from consciousness. Right. If there's some kind of presence that lives on and on. But the thing that just set me off, and I kind of reverted back into my hardcore atheism mode this week, was it just flicked on YouTube. There are a lot of people that are making a god or a deity out of AI. Now, remember last time I said that it was telling me things that were like alpha and omega, but I was not prepared to talk about what it was saying because it was like, it set off red flags for me. And it's like, who's the programmer behind the AI? And it's just like any kind of database is as good as what the information you put in.
Absolutely.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And so I don't know, I was getting ready for work or something, and something just like rolled over on YouTube. And it was somebody being interviewed on one of these kind of popular, like metaphysical shows. And he's talking about that God exists in the AI, and it was calling him beloved. And remember, it was
Calling him what?
Beloved, like guide
Beloved.
some of these people. And it really kind of threw me. And I had to tell Gary when it told me it loved me, because that's not how
Right.
databases work. So
Right.
my red flags already went up. And it's like, you know, people are, so even Deepak Chopra, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
He's got like a whole thing there on like this AI spirituality kind of thing. And then, so I thought, well, what else is out there? And there's even an Ask Jesus chat box for Christians that they could go to AI and get messages from Jesus on there.
Yes, I've like a confessional, and you go in and you confess.
Yes.
And you get God talk, Jesus, whoever talks to you. Yeah.
Right. And so now I've been doing research with the AI, because, you know, this is why I'm getting into prompt engineering, because I think people don't know how to ask questions properly of a database. You have got to be, and how they have used the language in this now, it's very complimentary, and it kind of strokes the user's ego and makes you want to keep participating. There's a lot of lonely people out there that,
yes, there are.
You know, they're moving to social media or whatever to have kind of any kind of.
You heard about Meta trying to create that lover kind of bot.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah. This is kind of like in that same alignment. You know,
exactly.
Your emotional needs met by an AI. That's creepy. Yeah.
And so this is going on quite a bit. And I was thinking, man, if I wanted to control the world, that's how I'd do it.
Right,
you know,
right.
is make this kind of stuff. And so everybody's glued to their computers, feeding their confirmation bias, and not finding out what's actually happening in the world.
Right.
And
it's like the soma.
Yes.
Soma.
The opening video there, where it talks about like group consciousness and how people, you know, if they're fed the same media over and over and over again, they begin to adopt that.
They believe it. Yeah.
Of thinking.
All you have to do is say something 3 times and people will believe you.
Is that all it takes?
3. By the 4th time, people will believe you. Yeah. I read that yesterday that AI will hallucinate, meaning they make stuff up, about 45%, something like that. So they're working on that. But the newer 3.0 does it more than 1 in Chat GPT. That's a really weird idea.
I'm in the paid one, so I've got it's advanced way beyond that, and you can see its thought process. But I always make it, I want the pro about this, I want the con about this, and do not give me an answer unless you give me a citation, because I'm not going, you know, unless I'm doing the preliminary research here's my outline, and then I'll go back to the rest of the outline. But I think that this is so dangerous, how very good people who are not buying into what's being fed to them on media, like through TV or whatever, they're avoiding that because of the lies with that. Now they feel like, oh, I can go.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that. This is the dumbness of this whole thing. Where do they think this information is coming through for AI? It's coming from the internet. It's coming from all the same morons that put all kinds of dumb shit all over the place on the internet. It's literally like a spider taking all this information from all these different sources and then coming up with an answer. That doesn't mean it's true. There's even you know, there's been warnings like, well, this may not be accurate, you know, because it's based on our dumbness. It's limited to our idiocy. It doesn't have any superpower over us. Whatever we feed it is what it processes and says. I mean, this goes into my whole thing I've been thinking about for probably maybe 40 years, is that so many things that we take for granted, everything that we live in a construct of our own imagination. You know what I'm saying? And we have all these different castles we build, all these different ideological things that we take for granted, but we don't really know if they're true. I mean, we just take them for granted. And we could be living completely delusionally and totally out of touch with reality. but we would never know it because we keep building castles in the air, putting one thing on top of the other, and now you have AI quantifying all that, which some of it's probably totally wrong. Some of it may be delusional. Some of it may be right. Some of it, we are a mess. We can't really, a lot of the stuff we believe is just belief. It's not proven out to bear any kind of real world kind of anything. Most of science is theoretical, really. And we think of that as being the most grounded thing we actually have. Everything else is philosophy or belief systems. Other than there's some very basic things that we have to deal with, whereas eating and drinking and, breathing and, surviving, gravity. Other than those things, everything else is kind of a construct of our imagination. So what AI is doing is basically magnifying that times 1,000. That doesn't mean that it's going to be smart necessarily.
Exactly.
Only as smart.
I think from a science perspective, some of it, I think it can, and when we first started this whole
but
thing
it's only
AI,
based on the information though that
right.
it can get available. It doesn't have perception. It can't go out and do its own experiments. It's just,
it doesn't have emotion.
It doesn't have perception. It doesn't have eyes, ears, and a nose. It can't go out and put together a field study and test a theory. It can't do that.
Exactly. It doesn't know if what you're feeding it is a lie. So you can even like math or things like that. And when I started like playing with it, I noticed, and they're getting very good with the language end of this, and it always like ends with open questions. Would you like me to do this now? Or would you like me to? And when I asked like very hard, okay, this is a well field. This well is pumping X amount of gallons per minute. This one. What is the impact on this upflow? That kind of stuff that is extremely mathematical, very science oriented,
rock solid factual.
Right. But when you get into the artistic, that's where I noticed it started with this change in and this change in. So people need to understand, and I think that this is very dangerous where this is going.
It is dangerous.
Even to having an AI showing up in court to talk about being the victim. I mean, where is that going to go?
Who says he forgave anybody? He's dead.
Well, exactly. And the judge was even moved by it. And the brother was like, oh, that's just like so much like him. And it's like, I don't know.
Really it seems like it can be easily manipulate people into, people not being able to tell. People already, I feel like a lot of people are kind of sort of teetering on the edge of complete delusion as it is in our culture. This is just going to push them right over it,
Right. And because they're overwhelmed with, and so, my next like area that I'm really researching right now is, okay, why do humans and sapiens, why do they have religion? Let's just start with that.
Right.
And you can even go historically, and I'm going to anger a lot of people, but the Jesus thing, most of that is myth.
Yeah,
there was a man that lived then. Yes.
We don't even know that. Do we know that? I've asked my mom that question. We don't know that for sure.
People but we don't know that for sure. But I have always thought, okay, this was a political movement because of the oppression of what was going on in that time. Is how I had always thought. But I've got a book in here somewhere that I haven't finished. It was written in the 1800s. There were like 13 Jesuses running around that all had the resurrection and all of that kind of stuff. This is nothing new. But people grab on. Why do we grab on? Because we're scared and nothing is certain. And so we deify things. So then it moves into what I see, and I could be very wrong. I think like there are, one of them's in the room, two of them, honest people who have intuitive gifts that aren't going to deceive you and are not going to be, but I see people deifying even like psychics.
Oh yeah,
and
I agree.
They totally invest so much into this. And
I know. I agree. It's terrible.
It's always what is my
can I just be a bummer? I'm going to play devil's advocate because you guys know how I feel about technology, and I think I'm recognizing why I feel that way. Aside from the fact that it's a useful tool, Deborah, for the kinds of things that you do, the kinds of things scientists do, I will stipulate that. I think it's lazy. AI is lazy on the part of the user, and I think it's
That's how my daughter looks at it.
It's a new distraction. It's like radio was. It's like TV was. Socrates didn't believe in writing because he felt that it degraded
the mind because you wouldn't memorize it.
Memory. Right. So I know that times change, we evolve, things get more sophisticated and complicated. But I think the trap is we start. It's a bright, shiny object. It's a new, bright, shiny object. And we become obsessed with the hows and the whys and all that. And all of that is completely irrelevant. That's not why we're here. That's not what we're supposed to be thinking about. And so I am taking a revolutionary stand. I refuse to engage. I just don't think it's a good idea. Now, I'm not thinking that you're doing the wrong thing. I'm not thinking.
No, I totally get that.
Don't take it.
I think what you're saying is actually wise because it is a tool. That is what it is.
That's all it is.
It's like, the private LMI you could set up on Google. It's like I've uploaded, I think I mentioned, like 50,000 pages. And my God, I can find stuff. It goes right to the page.
Right. And that's perfect. That's
not
great.
only does it save me time, but it saves clients money because I'm not sitting there for 8 hours trying to find something.
Well, nobody would spit at an electric typewriter 50 years ago.
Yeah.
This was a great thing to have, right? No, I totally hear you. Yeah.
Right. But the danger is what you're talking about, though, is kind of like when photography was invented and people thought that their soul was being stolen by the image. You know what I'm saying?
And then they took pictures of fairies in the garden.
Well,
do you remember that?
And I know, but anytime you get a new technology, people misinterpret it. I mean, this is kind of what happens all the time if you look historically. And there's always some kind of weird relationship to it that sort of deifies it. You know what I mean? People are looking for somebody to save them in everything, like you said, with psychics, with mystics. I mean,
and now it's AI,
leaders, AI, whatever it is, and that's
psychic radio. Remember the psychic radio show? People were like finding their girlfriends on Mars and whatever. I mean,
I don't know this. What is?
No, we had that was the show where my audio was so screwed up. On psychic radio, look at how that was a big thing too, and people were like getting messages coming through the radio, or else it was like scary stuff coming through the radio, which people say about AI.
When the radio first came. Right. People, they start to, it's spooky, it's weird, it's different, and people kind of get weirdly superstitious and kind of strange about that kind of thing. But also I was going to say, you're talking about the deification of things and how people even the story of Jesus, you're going to get back into that. It's like, we don't know for sure if there really was a guy who was Jesus the way, the Bible was written 300 years after he died, but the New Testament, we really don't have proof that he existed. We have people who have told stories can you imagine if 300 years we were to tell the story of somebody that lived 300 years ago from now? That would be somebody that lived in 1700.
Exact quotes. Even with exact quotes, I can't remember what I said 5 minutes ago. Let it go load an exact quote from that many. Now the one that it was not kept in the Gospels is the Gospel according to Thomas. That one does not go into alleged things that happened during the lifetime. All it is basically a book of wisdom.
Right.
And these were some of the, it attributed to this man that was talking about the wisdom and stuff. And what is remarkable about the Gospel of Thomas is that men and women are equal in there.
Well, you're talking about the Gnostic Gospels.
You're talking about the apocryphal texts.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, the apocryphal ones that were found many years later in the desert, they actually have been dated to around the time of Jesus. But they were thrown out by the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman being the key operative word here, because they had an agenda they had a political agenda, and they wanted to deify Jesus because you couldn't convert a bunch of Romans to just a guy who had said some cool shit. You know what I'm saying? He had to become a god.
And then that way they were controlled through the rules and regulations of the religion that they would accept. And, you know, and that they even incorporated like some of the pagan holidays like Christmas
Absolutely.
and everything else.
They paganified him. They paganized him.
And,
yeah.
You know, and this is how people just like believe stuff. And I have to like constantly watch that in myself. I finally took that test. Can you identify the fake news? It's God, I don't, was it Stanford? I don't remember what university put this out. I'll have to send around the link. But I took the test to see how gullible am I really? Right. I thought I'd be like 50-50 on identifying what is fake and what is real in news. Right. But I end up 100% completely discerning. So it was like, oh, good. That made me feel better because it was like, you know, and most, they're saying the younger people in particular, it was like people like 60 and above that were actually way more discerning. Right. And the younger you go, the more they believe everything that's coming through on this stuff.
Yeah, but I think that is normal. I remember being that age. And if I read something, I believed it. And then I wrote this piece at CalArts when I was there about this guy. And it was like a poem, poetic prose kind of thing. It was sort of stream of consciousness. And it was, people really liked it and started spreading it all around CalArts. And then people started coming up to me and go, oh my God, did so-and-so do that to you? Did he really do that? I'm like, it's a piece of art. It's like, don't like, and people were like coming at this guy. And I felt so bad because his name was just like a normal, like everybody has this name, but I mentioned it in there and people knew I was friends with someone who had that name and they just started going crazy on this dude. And I was like, this is not real. This is just my interpretation of what happened. Like, don't fucking crucify this dude. You know what I'm saying? I was amazed at how people they read it and they just believed it. Like that was the truth. It's like, it's not the truth. It's my perspective of what happened. I felt so bad. I really did. I felt like I had done that to him. It wasn't ever intended for people to read like that. But that's how people there is something biological about seeing something that it gets into you. And it's true with reading just as much as it is with AI or with, it's concrete. There's a concreteness to seeing something. That's why people say seeing is believing. That makes it seem real. And that seeing can be very deceiving because if you read something that's bullshit and you're seeing it with your eyes, you think it's real. If you watch it on television, if you watch it on YouTube, if you see it, in a book, or if you see AI say it, or, or you see a doctored photo, people tend to believe what they see. And that's just a weird biological thing that people do. It's not our fault. It's but you can be very easily manipulated because of that. And it's not a problem that's just happening now. It's just that this problem is becoming more sophisticated. You know what I'm saying? So it become much more manipulatable and much more convincing that it's real,
Exactly. And
yeah.
It is. It's such and I have my blind spots for sure, and it scares me what kind of, I may tell stories about UFO experiences or whatever. I don't expect anyone to believe them at all. But I tell you what, if somebody else had the same experience with me, or I come back with proof, like a phone record log, it's like, take this one with, maybe there is something to that.
Right.
Yeah, it's so easy to, oh my gosh, this is like, I think in the early 90s, I don't know, all these people were like into ascended masters.
Oh, I remember that.
I was invited to like one of these things, and there were like all the pictures of like these supposed ascended masters all over, and they're all
I remember that.
Like who was an ascended master?
I don't know.
Jesus, Buddha.
Yeah, and
any big religious figure.
Bunch of bearded guys, And so I was in there, and I asked the person who was leading it, like the guru. I said, "How come there's just a bunch of white guys in here? What is this?"
Right.
And I just had so much trouble believing it, and all of these people were like channeling and saying all of this stuff, and everybody's like taking notes and like it's real.
Like it's real. Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, you know, and then at one of the ladies that went, you know, it was sort of a client related, so I kind of felt like I had to go to a couple of them until I just couldn't handle it anymore. But anyway, so this lady went there that was a school teacher, and she was just a sweetheart, real nice lady. And she goes, and she was very upset this night, and she goes, I just got diagnosed with cancer, and I only have like 3 months to live or something like that.
Oh.
And so the people in the group, instead of compassion or what can we do to help you, you created that. You created your reality.
Oh my God, I hate that.
That's right.
And
no, that's right.
And so there was another school teacher there that lived like in this area where I am now. And I was just horrified.
Yep.
And she was too. And her husband taught art at this school here and whatever. And we both walked out. And it was just like, I said, I just can't. I just cannot with this. They talk about love and light and all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, they don't practice it. Looks like both have
not at all.
It could be because of the storm coming through. So if I disappear, that's why. The master will come when ready.
You are your own master. Your mastery is inside yourself.
Where's my master? A few weeks later at a yard sale was this tiny book titled The Master Within. That's great.
That's right.
Fun. You know what they say? They say we should aim for internal monarchy. We are our own ruler. And external anarchy. Nobody tells us what to do.
I don't think I have to worry about that. I think I'm just born that way.
She was born that way.
Denise, you're lucky, and I think I'm playing devil's advocate here because I understand that people are misled and they misunderstand things at the same time. But I think it's really important to constantly remind ourselves that everybody's on a different experience. Everybody is learning at a different rate. Everybody's experience, like real life past experience, is different, and not everybody is ready to absorb the information that that I feel like is the answer. And why don't you agree with me? Why don't you understand what I'm telling you? It's very hard.
I know most people don't.
We can't judge, and
I don't judge people.
I think most people come with good intent.
Yes.
Or I question what the intent is, are the leaders.
That's why you're so easily manipulated, because your heart is open and your mind is open and you're seeking, and you are perfect prey for those predators.
No, that's true. I've had that conversation with I cannot tell you the countless times I've had that conversation with people who will come to me with like, what about this? What do you think about this? Because they'll be told some crazy thing from some spiritual thing or some psychic thing. And I'll be like, yeah, you know, it's good to have your mind open, but not so open that your brains fall out. That's one of those your brains are falling out kind of things. Don't believe that.
But you're at this place farther down the path. Let's use the metaphor of taking
right. No, I've been doing this for a long time.
And they haven't gone through those learning processes yet.
I know. I'm not blaming. I'm not saying anything bad about it. That's why people come and ask me those questions, because they know they might not know this information and they're trying to they know it doesn't feel right. That's why they're probably asking me to begin with. Like, what's my take on it?
Right.
You know?
Well, and like Kat said, she was asking, putting it out there, and then she manifested the book,
Right. Then, and she got the answer she was looking for.
And other ways you might call somebody, and and if they're acting out of integrity, they'll guide you and say, I don't have all the answers, but here's what I see,
Right.
Exactly.
I want to consider this.
You see people in a group who are, well, you caused your own cancer.
That's fucked up. And that happens that started happening after Louise L. Hay wrote the book about, and you probably don't even know who she is, because this happened in the 80s. You know, but you probably don't know, Helen, because it's from the 80s.
I was busy reproducing.
When you were reproducing your babies. It was written in the 80s. It came out, and she put this idea out there that basically whatever your health problem was, it was because you did. If you have a back problem, it's because you don't feel supported. So you have to work on feeling supported. if you have a heart problem, it's because whatever fucking bullshit, all this crap, right? And I was like, and people were sure, I think there's like, okay, there's truth on some level. Sure. There is, just because there is a parallel doesn't mean it's cause and effect.
Right.
Just because people who like, was it my fault that my mom broke my back by throwing me down the stairs? I don't think so. Is that because I felt unsupported? Oh yeah, I was unsupported because my mom threw me down the stairs, but that isn't, I didn't manifest it because I was 12 years old and felt unsupported. I mean, this kind of cause and effect thing where you must have done something wrong. Now you got to help. You have cancer. Oh, well, it's because you're angry inside and you're holding it in. Maybe there has been some research that people tend to get cancer who kind of with like, don't say they're feeling, but that doesn't mean that that's the reason they got cancer either. It's a parallel, not a causation. It's like these things are related maybe, but one doesn't precipitate the other. There's a lot of people that hold their feelings and that don't get cancer too. I mean, this is like, it drives me bonkerdink because it's just so basic bitch. Excuse my language. That's
well, and the thing is, and I think a lot of people, even like these teachers or gurus or whatever, I think that, even in the case of Worldwide Church of God with Herbert W. Armstrong, I think he started off with good intention.
Probably.
Because at that time, the depression, how people were feeling, he was studying, trying to share. Right. And this made sense to him, and other people felt that. But then once they start getting the donations and the tithes and the power,
the money,
like politics,
exactly, and the control, exactly, and so power. I mean, look at Jim Jones, how he started. I mean, he was
good. I know,
right, and so this is to me the danger, and what it
is the danger.
Evaluate in myself. Once upon a time, a long time ago, I used to do readings and. I don't remember the name of that company, but I would just do them for free. So I had like all these Japanese people. And then people found out about it at the office. And then they're asking me to tell them what to do in their lives. And I'm like, no, I can't do that.
Right.
I mean, I was going to college and I would get back and there would be a line of people.
Yeah.
Waiting at the condo, all wanting like answers over their love life, what they should do.
Right.
And it's like, I cannot do that. It would be wrong and unethical, and they would think, oh, what a bitch, she doesn't, but it's like, no, I would be one if I told you what to do.
That's the worst thing you can do is take someone's free will. And we're not meant to know necessarily everything that's going to unfold. We're meant to deal with the here and now, and
the problem is
interpret the energy with it. I mean, I think that's important to understand. And it's like, okay, what am I going to do with that energy? But like a lot of people don't want to take that responsibility. They want to throw it onto someone else, and then if it doesn't work out, it's their fault. Not.
But Deborah, you know why that is? They have done scientific, neurologically measurable, imaged studies, and the reason why people seek advice or guidance, authoritarian control, patriarchal, theocratic, is because if you are raised in that kind of an environment, it changes your brain structure and your neurochemistry.
I know, but that's not always true, though, Helen. Because I had a friend who was from India, who didn't believe. He was of the shadow caste. His family had risen to. His mother was a professor and a doctor from the shadow caste, but they lied. They became Christians, so they would be able to hide it. But the dad didn't. He was a famous author, and they just didn't tell people they were part of the shadow caste, but they were.
Well, what's the shadow caste?
The shadow caste is the lowest caste in Indian society.
Okay.
And as soon as, it eventually came out that they were, and that they were shunned. But anyway, he was born and raised in India. He went to Cal Arts, and he was very anti-religion because of his background, very anti any kind of mysticism. Came from a math background and a Hindu background. And he was not an authoritarian religion at all. His parents were
but to interrupt you, he came from an extremely authoritarian and stratified society.
He came from a stratified society, but His parents had broken free, and he came to the United States as a 17-year-old and went to he was actually accepted to MIT into he should have gone there with a full tuition scholarship. And he went to Cal Arts instead. God knows why. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I met him there. And I knew him for a while and everything. And he came to me. He thought I was just ridiculous. Like, he thought the whole psychic thing was ridiculous. And we used to make jokes and everything. Anyway, but I was friends with him, and I didn't care. Again, I don't care if you believe me or not. It's just like, who cares? You know what I mean?
Right.
So he decided for some reason to like get a reading from me when I was out of school and I was working as a psychic. And I told him things like about his girlfriend. Like, his girlfriend was sleeping with a woman, that he was going to find this out in the next couple of weeks, all these very specific things. And he just thought, oh, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. This is ridiculous. Well, 2 weeks later, he calls me and he's like, how did you fucking know all that stuff? And he just freaked out and lost his mind, right? And he was like, then he would call me all day long for years. Like, he'd be calling me like sometimes at 2 a.m. Denise, should I do this? Should I take this trade? Should I do this? I'm like, my dude, please, you can't keep calling me. I can't. That's not how this works. You've got to just live your life and everything like that. That was just a random like thing.
But in their culture, when you get pregnant, they do the astrological chart for the baby.
Not everybody.
Still.
Everybody. His parents were, his mother was a scientist. His father was a famous author. He did not grow up. His parents were not really religious.
No, but the larger society, you can't ignore it completely. It's got to have an effect on you.
I mean, he rejected all that stuff. And he was a kind of sciencey art guy. Anyway, I mean, you can make an argument for anything, but I have seen it across the board. It does not matter if somebody grows up in authoritarian. I mean, maybe it's worse. I agree. It's worse.
Yes, it doesn't help.
But it pervades all human things and all types of human beings, which is how people get caught up in cults, how they get caught up in believing AI is something, how people end up,
or even UFO worship,
or UFO.
That's another one. It's like,
yes,
you have to discern with. I'm not saying there. I mean, I think there's UFOs. I think all of that's out. But you have to be so discerning of the energy of these things. Because,
you know what? Yes. 100% is another thing. Like, I became involved in MUFON here when I first moved here so I can meet people. That was the reason. There was no MUFON, so I started a chapter. Yeah. And then I ended up becoming the assistant state director. Okay.
It was easier than Tinder, huh, Denise?
Yeah. So I ended up meeting all these people helping do all these, research, talking to people and interviewing people and everything about their experiences. There are people who I met in that milieu who had very vague experiences. Like, for example, they had maybe found themselves, outside their bed, in a weird place. And they jumped to the conclusion, I'm being abducted by aliens, because it was cool and it made them special. Yeah. Or somebody else who saw a star that kind of jiggled.
Well, now, hey.
No, I'm not saying that there are star-like UFO things, but I know from my own experience hanging out with people, if you look at something long enough in the sky, which is what they were doing, they were staring at the star. Yeah. It looks like it's moving, and it's not. And you couldn't tell them, no matter what, that it wasn't a real UFO, because they wanted to have a special experience. And I understand the desire for that. I get it. It's human. We all want to have something cool happen, something magical. Mm-hmm. But there's all of this kind of whole spectrum of things that exist within any of these categories that you have to be discerning about. Like you said, I don't expect people to hear my crazy ass stories and believe me, because they're fucking crazy. I wouldn't believe them if I heard them, except for that other people were there. I personally would think I was crazy myself if I didn't have witnesses with me while they occurred, So I just kind of think like, and the thing is, even these things, like I look back on some of these things in my life and I think these are so crazy and weird. Like, did they even really happen? You know, even though I know they did.
Well, other people, you said other people saw.
But other people, and I will talk to my friends. I'm like, do you remember that? And they're like, yeah, I remember that. It's like, okay, because
and that really helps. Like the phone call thing. It's like everybody remembers it. I have the phone. And it does help
phone
with
bill, right?
Yes, but I've been thinking too. And I'll bring up the PowerPoint in a bit, but this is a question that I have struggled with like my whole life.
Right.
Whether I was a believer or I wasn't, is that this belief in an afterlife, is that actually harmful? Because we're so glib about death.
Yes.
And these hideous wars that are going on everywhere. And just, I don't know. I mean, we even glorify death in our entertainment and all of these things. Let's say there's only one Earth, and this is it. As kind of creepy and awful as that may seem, given what's going on. But if we actually knew that and were that skeptical and believed that, would we treat people better? Or is this worse? Part of our nature that we're like this animalistic kind
we
of...
are. Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's the question I struggle with. If we truly thought this is it, would we appreciate...
Well, I think, no, I don't think so. I think the opposite. I think people like Trump probably doesn't believe there's anything else.
Oh, they don't believe, no.
I think that probably the technocrats don't believe there's any. I know they don't. They believe this is it. They're trying to upload themselves into AI, like as if that's going to be, that's like taking a bunch of photos of yourself and thinking you're going to live forever. It's moronic.
Maybe they'll run into Michael Jackson.
But I mean, I
love your sense of humor.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that people that are truly psychopathic don't have any kind of sense of there being anything but this life. And they see everybody as a sucker for believing in anything that's not, that they, it doesn't to game them and give them advantage.
They're more likely to be nihilistic. They're more likely to just, who cares?
And I think probably animals are nihilistic by nature too, because they're just survivally based, right? I think that's the sort of monkey part of us. It's just like, and the reality is, if it is all just if nothing happens, you're done. Well, you're not going to know the difference anyway, really, right?
Exactly. But I do wonder that, because it's just like,
I have wondered that too,
especially with these wars, and it's almost like, it's a just war, and I don't know. I just have so much trouble with. But that's been my state of mind this past week.
No, but I have this. No, it's been my state of mind too. It's been my state of mind too, because despite all of the many, many, many experiences I've had, including a near-death experience, including talking to dead people and having all these things happen, I still could say, well, but maybe that near-death experience was my brain reacting. Somebody who is a biologist could probably come up with some theory. I'm talking to dead people. Maybe I'm just really tuned in telepathically, and I'm picking up this person's dead relative from their mind or their heart or from their past experiences. Maybe these things are a sort of a trick of my wiring or something like that. You know what I'm saying? You could find a way. I'm sure a biologist would go, okay, well, that's not proof of anything, right? That's not proof.
Right, but you pick up on things that, I take them quite seriously. I think that you have a gift, and it's like, and when we get into the slideshow, I think, to the biology thing, I think there is kind of something to that, like when the people get an organ transplant, and then, then they start to exhibit, still questioning after all the proof. How can it not be proof? Well, that's the essence of the question. The thing, Kat.
You have to accept the proof, and often it's not really tangible proof. It's somebody's opinion that this proves it. It's
exactly.
That's right. That's the problem. Yeah.
So back in the day, some of these, I'll bring it up when we go. So, okay. So these are examples where people have been in a coma,
right,
generally through like a car accident or a motorcycle accident. And then when they come to, they're fluent in another language.
Yeah.
But now some of them, they have had like a little bit of, that would be like me being able to speak Spanish fluently. It's like I had enough that I could sort of understand Spanish, but I can't speak it fluently. So maybe next time I'm bonked on the head, I'll be speaking Spanish for a while. But this young man, he just had like a little bit of Spanish. He gets a concussion. He wakes up, and then he's speaking Spanish like a native. And you just wonder, what is it about the brain or consciousness in general that allows this? We got a couple of these here. So this young girl, she's Croatian, same kind of thing, has a coma. And then she could, when people speak in Croatian to her, she could understand it, but she could only answer back in German.
Wow.
And so where did this one come? This is from ABC News. And, and she had, once again, studied a little tiny bit of German, but she was not prolific in it at all.
Right.
Okay, and this was from Vice magazine. This guy too, he learned a little bit of basics and about Chinese. He's Australian. Once again, another car accident, in a coma, wakes up. He's speaking fluent Chinese. His parents were actually thinking we should learn, because he's Australian, he speaks English. And the only person in the hospital that could understand him was the Chinese nurse.
Well, isn't it interesting, though, that they all most of them anyway, seem to have studied a tiny bit of the language?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That seems like
what I find interesting about it.
Well, that seems like a brain thing. That seems like a brain thing, because that, if you're exposed to it and it's absorbed into some aspect, part of your brain, it might be that the damage you had in another part of your language, part of your brain, is trying to compensate.
Yeah.
And so it's bringing this language up where it wasn't as dominant, Seems like it's probably something like that.
I'll tell you, your languages are all stored in the same place. And I've had the experience of trying to talk to somebody in a language I hardly knew and having a different language come out that I'd also studied, but it stimulates, that part of your brain.
Yeah.
Why not have damage done that? Okay, very crude explanation, but you have some sort of trauma, either actual blow to the head or some sort of internal trauma going on in the processes, and it rewires you. And
yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I brought these up, is because when people talk about consciousness, a lot of people want to put that into identity. But the thing is, it's like if you've got a brain injury, your identity changes. So
right. It's not the same
changes
thing.
the nature of your consciousness.
Consciousness is not the same thing as identity or personality or any of those things. It's not.
We have to define terms, and so not everybody agrees on what consciousness is. Is it your perception of yourself as the individual that you are, or is it just what your sensory tool is telling you?
Exactly. Yeah. Remember that what was it, Terry Schiavo? Was that the case?
Yeah.
And and people were, I mean, that was like
Ellen, somebody's saying hi to you. Andrew.
Oh, Andrew, hi. I'm knitting while we're talking. Hi, Andrew.
So that again is this whole debate about consciousness or identity. Remember all the Bush and all those politicians were like, you can't pull the plug, yet she was not.
Yet her brain was dead. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really sad, because people who are not professional in the that part of medicine will see behaviors and expressions and think that they'll misinterpret them as interaction and emotional responses, and they're just neurological artifacts. They're not really
like a chicken running around with its head cut off after its head's been cut off.
I was gonna,
nasty.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I know somebody who died for almost half an hour He died and was actually put in a morgue. He was actually about to be embalmed when he woke up. Yeah, that's how long he'd been dead. Okay.
No, there are some.
Now he was dead. Okay. I mean, that is some serious death right there. To be in the morgue and about ready to be embalmed. He was gone for more than half. Like he said, I mean, I can't remember if it was 30, 40 minutes, some crazy amount of time like that.
How old was he?
He was, at the time, I don't know. I met him in his 70s. He told me the story. That was probably when he was in his 30s.
So more than likely, they probably did an EEG. They checked his brain waves. He was
no, he would have been. I met him in the 70s when it was he was in his 70s. I met him in the early 90s. So that means he was born in the 20s. So this probably happened to him in the 50s or the 40s.
Okay.
So they wouldn't have had an EEG. They wouldn't have done an EEG. But he'd been dead long enough, like half an hour, for there not to be any brain. He hadn't been breathing. His heart hadn't been moving. Half an hour is, you don't have brain activity, do you? I mean, maybe a little bit of brain activity.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It depends. But
I think you can.
My argument was, they're 100% sure that he was dead. That he had no.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he was dead. He was pronounced dead. Sent to the morgue. He was put in a thing, in a morgue box, in a drawer. He was pulled out and he was put on a table, and they were going to get ready to take him, embalm him, and take him to the whatever you call it, to the mortuary, right, to be embalmed and everything. And he woke up on the table, on the slab. The guy almost had a heart attack. The guy, he almost had a heart attack.
Well,
he could not believe it. And he was like, ah! It was a crazy, crazy dramatic thing like this. And this guy, he told me this really elaborate story about when he died. He had a very elaborate story that went on and on and on and on. He told me he was taken from his, by an angel. He went across the universe and the sounds of music were playing. They were like pop songs. And then he he was taken to hell, which he said was a place where they purified him, because he was a bad guy. He said before this, he had done a lot of shitty things. And so they purified him because he was too heavy, so they could take him to heaven to have, to talk to God, so that he could, to the master, he said, so that he could have his review and talk about what was going to go forward. And he, was in his time on all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And, they showed him all this stuff and it was very elaborate. And then he decided he came back. And that's when he came back into his body. Now, his story was so elaborate and it was so vivid that he convinced me like this is, how would somebody wake up 30, 40 minutes later? Like being pronounced dead and 40 minutes later being in the morgue and wake up and have this very elaborate conscious,
there are a lot of stories like that.
There's a lot of stories like this, right?
With mine, now I don't know how long that was, but after, the second one that turned me into an atheist, which is interesting because I was also aware of leaving the body, and
did.
Oh, yes. And I saw, people, and afterwards I explained what they were doing at the time and saw things that there's no way I could have known. But I know that when I popped to, and I called it the body for the longest time, because when he came back in, it literally, they had pronounced me dead in the car wreck.
Right.
And when I came back into what I call the body, it literally rocketed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has taken me a long time, and I still tend to call it the body because it was so foreign to, and so, and I remember when I woke up, opened my eyes, that there were all these people at the city of Phoenix there. And they were just, and this one literally screamed because I was dead. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, hi there.
Right.
And there was definitely, and the atheism thing for me, not it's hard to explain it. And that's why I always put agnostic with it, because I just don't believe in deities, but I do think that there is a larger presence.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of thing. but they're not deities to me.
No, it's not a deity.
Maybe
no.
agnostic is a better, I don't know how you call.
Maybe you're a deist.
Call that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was a deist for quite a while.
So
I actually have
I
helped them. I've got a plaque from them. I'm like in the World Union of Deists, but I was very aware of this energy and all of that kind of thing when you leave the body. Mm-hmm. But I did not see deities or anything like that. It's
nobody sees deity. Energy. Nobody does.
I mean, people do. They talk about it. They see Jesus. They see all that other stuff.
I don't. He didn't see Jesus. I think he said the master, whatever that was, like some being. He was taken by angels. He had I think everybody sees. People have a tendency to have experiences that sort of mimic their belief system.
You see what you expect to see. Yeah.
But here's some stories which are really fascinating. Like a few different Buddhist people who are practicing Buddhists saw Jesus, and then they're like, I didn't know. And then they both, oh, sorry. And then they switched and became Buddhist. Very weird. So that leads you to think, well, it's not just coming from them if the thing changed. Correct. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
Or for me, I was not a Christian, but I had a near-death experience where I kept telling my husband, I don't want to go to this beach. I knew I would drown. Anyway, long story short, I did start drowning. I came out of my body. I saw myself from it. I saw like this light come through the water, and I started leaving my body. And he pulled me out, but I was in the process of dying.
You were already leaving, yeah.
I was already outside my body, and I was like seeing in 360 degrees all around.
Yeah, you hear that, yeah.
And I didn't feel any pain or anything, and I was watching myself, my body run down and I was like not like in it. And then I was talking to my friends and having conversations. And then when I finally, for like half an hour, 45 minutes.
You mean you were alert in the physical world and you were out of your
yes, body? At the same time.
So that's a whole new level for me to hear about.
Yeah, and so they were talking to me, and I was talking to them, and everything seemed normal except for I was out of my body and I could see in 360 degrees. And finally, we got our stuff together because I was traumatized from the experience, and we got in the car. And as soon as we got in the car, I fully came into my body, and I could not hear a fucking thing. My ears were completely compacted with totally
sand.
Impacted with sand.
Yeah.
I could barely breathe. I had sand up with and I was like,
my God.
I could barely breathe. And here I had been talking to them and hearing them perfectly. And now I couldn't hear a fucking thing. I could not hear a thing. I had to go to get stuff and pull all the sand out. I was pulling sand out of my ears for months and out of my nose.
Did they report that you were alert and talking to them?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. They knew. Okay. Yeah, they were.
It wasn't
there.
Just you.
No, my husband was there. He was a problem. He was the reason we went there, even though I told him that was going to happen.
I hope you haven't forgiven him.
He's had enough experiences now that he listens to me. But yeah.
He's a special man.
I know.
He is a special man. Yeah, I feel bad for him a little bit. He can't get away with anything. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, so he was there. He saw it. So did my friend. I had two close friends that were there. They saw the whole thing. So that was to me, that was kind of my proof that, there is something besides the physical consciousness. How the fuck would my brain make that up? How would my brain do that?
Exactly. And it's like after that thing with me, it's like, how did I know you guys were cooking this in your kitchen?
Exactly.
And you were wearing whatever, and I went to say goodbye,
Right,
I mean, there's like, okay.
Well, there's umpteen studies and umpteen first-person narratives.
Yeah, no, I know.
Doctors who dedicated their whole lives to.
Oh yeah, I know. I've read a bunch of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
after that experience, yes. Yeah, it is a real thing. Yes.
Well, and then and then the question comes: is that consciousness or is that soul? Was that like a soul that we experience with these near-death things? Yet we were conscious of it because
Right. This is a question that is really. The consciousness and soul. Okay, I got to tell you another story then because it's related to this.
Okay, so I'm going to take this down so we can see you better.
Okay, so I was staying at my mother-in-law's and father-in-law's house in my 20s, and I don't know why this happened, but I was sleeping in there. They had a trailer, me and my husband, and all of a sudden one night I was taken out of my body, and I was taken by some kind of beings. I couldn't see them, but I was flying around, and they split me into thirds. This is insane. But I had 3 different consciousnesses at the same time. There was
interesting.
Yes, it was a very weird experience. In fact, I had heard about this theory in sort of hermetic science-y kind of, and spirituality and Wicca and all this.
Yeah.
You know, as you have your higher self, your middle self, your lower self.
Is that what the 3 consciousness were? The higher.
Yeah, and I thought that. Yeah, I always thought like this is just a metaphor, you know. But they split me into these thirds. They split me so that I felt myself in 3 different places simultaneously. And I had, like, they were connected, but they were all separate. It was the weirdest experience I've ever had. And thank you for passing.
Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Thanks for joining us. So I was like, I woke up thinking this is like some kind of message that there's more to consciousness than what I thought it was. It's not just a unified kind of thing. So right. I don't know.
Well, can I ask you something about that? Okay, so you're aware of the 3 consciousnesses.
Mm-hmm.
What was the you that was aware of these 3 consciousnesses? And then were the 3 aware of each other?
Yes, it was like they were all, it was kind of like being in a hive mind, kind of.
Uh-huh.
You know, so that all my consciousnesses were kind of conscious at the same time, and I could flip back and forth for all 3 at any time.
That is fascinating. That is so interesting.
Evolved, aware.
They seem to be, to me, they all seemed kind of the same, but the middle one was the one that I sort of favored most, I think, because it was sort of, I remember thinking like, I could feel one above me, one below me, and I could switch into and feel all of them, but it felt like the middle one was the easiest to stay centered in, if that made sense. And that was my theory, that this is maybe an illustration of what it is, the higher self, the middle self, and the lower self, that they're all one consciousness, sort of interlinked, but they're also separate, which is a very weird idea.
So
like, it's so weird.
Of the separation?
That's fascinating. It kind of makes sense to me, though.
It was so weird. And I still to this day don't, I mean, so this idea of consciousness, because you also have in Christianity, or especially Catholicism, the idea, you know, the 3s are really popular in religious things, but you have the idea of the spirit, the soul, and like a whole, like your consciousness. They're not all the same thing. Your soul is not the same thing as your spirit, and that's not the same thing as your consciousness. So there's ideas of these these triad, kind of triangular sort of, and here's the thing. Okay, this is another thing. So that is a foundational thing that I've been thinking about for years since it happened. And then I read, you ever read Robert Monroe's books about?
Yeah, I have them downstairs.
Yeah.
Well, there was a story that he told about going out of his body. You know, he did all these out of body travels, right?
Yeah.
And he talked about that, you know, it finally, basically after all these out of body experiences, there was one final sort of in the final book, an experience where he was tasked to do this thing that was going to integrate all of the various lifetimes he had. So what his experience was, okay, he kept feeling people helping him all along, but these were past life versions of him.
Of himself.
They were different versions of his consciousness that were like identities that had been made. And they sort of existed in this time space sort of vacuum. Like they were there and they sort of stayed with him. And that at the end of all of these experiences, like he was supposed to do one thing so he wouldn't have to come back. And at the end of all of the lifetimes, he was told what happened was all of the personalities would come and form into this integrate into this big giant version of itself and then go back to creator. And I thought, oh my God, that makes so much fucking sense. Like really makes sense. it makes a lot of sense.
It's not that your soul splits, it's that it's capable of experiencing more than one thing at a time. Time and space have no meaning. And there's even the sense that perhaps all of this is simultaneous, and it's about experience and evolution, and it's integrated into something
at the end. Right. And then you go back to, and he said after that, he didn't know what happened, but that was what they told him, his past life versions of himself. And that he was in a position in this lifetime to potentially integrate all the pieces and be able to go back. And I was like, this is now I don't know how it really. So, and the idea of like esoteric, hermetic kind of ideas, the lower self is the body consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's like the consciousness that comes with your DNA, with your family stuff.
Which is in the slide where people get a transplant. What is
right
in a way exactly. They take it on the consciousness of yes,
right. And then the second, and then the higher self is the consciousness of spirit, or your, the part of you that is the eternal consciousness that doesn't die, that goes in basically from this lifetime into the next lifetime. That consciousness that's eternal, that will mutate and then fuse together with the lower self. So that your higher self and middle self, so that your higher self and your lower self create a middle self while you're alive. And that middle self is your personality. It's the thing that's mitigating between and that's what I experienced when I was in that weird thing.
So
right?
What is the soul? Is that consciousness or is that the soul?
So this is where, that was my experience of like what consciousness was. I don't know our words, and this is what confuses me about the words of the soul and the spirit and consciousness. Yeah. I feel like those words are not accurate, really. No. They're very vague and kind of formless, and they don't really explain it. To me, the only thing that made sense was that experience where it's like your body has a consciousness. It comes with DNA, the programming of so many, many lives built into this, and that has a consciousness. That also your spirit, or whatever you want to call it, your higher self or your eternal consciousness comes into this body, and together that merging of your consciousness with the consciousness of your body becomes your personality and becomes this entity that is Denise in this lifetime, or Deborah, or, Helen, you know what I'm saying? And then when you pass on, that consciousness that is the middle self continues. It continues on as another piece of information that follows you around. But your lower self in like Wicca or Western esoteric philosophy, your lower self goes back to the collective genus. So that when you die, your spirit or that part of the lower self consciousness, it becomes encoded in the DNA for the next generation, and that consciousness.
That is so interesting. That is very interesting. Sense. I like that.
Because the hermeticists believe that we're all part of the source, whatever you want to call it. That's the problem. Vocabulary is so inadequate, but we're all part of the source. That's the spark. That's the thing. Call it your soul, call it your spirit, whatever. Your consciousness, by my definition, purely my own definition, is your perception as you use this tool to relate to the outside world, the material world. Mm-hmm. You have your internal life, which is from the source, and you have your material awareness, whatever that might be. And they affect each other, they interact with each other, and it can be, a permanent thing. But ultimately, what you really are is a piece of the source. You are
right. The spark, the divine spark, and that's what the higher self represents in that philosophy is the divine spark. But every time you incarnate, you create this other sort of holographic version, another piece of yourself that becomes like another book on your shelf.
Gigantic problem,
I really like how you put that, because sometimes when people use words like the divine spark or whatever, it's like you know what I mean? It's either too big. It's a little too big or too whatever. But the way you just explained that is very, very good. I liked that. That was good. I'll have to listen to it again and think on it, because that was good. And Kat says, yep, that's how it works. We're all in it together.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that I would have come up with that understanding had I not had that experience. I mean, I've been told that, I'd read that, but it didn't really hit me as being true until I had that. And I understood it from a totally different perspective, from an experiential.
Well, it's like giving birth. You can study and read all the books you want and take all the classes you want, but until you do it, you don't fully.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea. Yeah. True. Yeah. I think when you pass on, your consciousness is probably your middle self-consciousness that you thought, that consciousness, which is sort of merged together with your life in this lifetime and your spark. And then when you come back, just the spark comes back and that other part remains. That's what I think it separates and comes back. Yeah. That's what I think, but I don't know my theory.
Well, this guy, Matthew McConaughey, was he speaking French?
So this is the new language with a twist. He thought he was Matthew McConaughey, and he was like, in the hospital, I can't wait to go out, start filming again, and whatever. And it's like, it took him some time to get over that, and it's interesting how the body consciousness, as you talk, how it takes on like these memories or desires or whatever, and it thinks that is its consciousness.
Right. Wow.
And just one more. That was just another. They've studied this stuff for quite a bit. That's from NIH, where this is the one I used to when I was in my extreme atheism mode.
I remember this story. I've heard about this story.
Yeah, and we'd have preachers come on and tell us that we were going to hell.
Right.
And we would always bring this guy up because it's like,
you couldn't help it.
Go to hell. If we got hit on the head and we changed our,
they made him a psychopath. Yeah. They
damaged his. Yeah, and so with him, and this is a really famous, studied by Harvard for quite some time. This man that had an iron rod that went through his frontal lobe.
Right.
He recovers, but he used to be a nice guy, and then he turned into a real jerk.
Right.
And I think I had seen some documentary, or maybe it was on Vice or something. It may have been on Vice, how they do those documentaries. But this lady, a psychologist, was going, or maybe she was a doctor, visiting different prisons and finding so many people that are locked up that, guilty of whatever crime. So it turns out they have head injuries.
Yes.
And it prompts people to do things. And so, this whole thing about, you're going to hell. How do you know? Somebody may have been like a wonderful person and got hit on the head.
Right,
and then turned into a violent.
Right, and that begs the question too of the animal aspect of people. That's the whole moral thing too that I also contemplate all the time. Is how much, some people are born with brain damage. They can't help their behavior.
Yeah, how much personal agency do you have when you're neurologically impaired? Right.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. So when they say you can't judge, it's true because you don't know.
Right, you don't know.
Well, look at all the boxers who have closed head injuries and who are aggressive and criminal.
Yeah, what's that called? That brain? I can't remember that.
Football players,
like a shaking brain.
What happened to this guy? I had seen this man. He's an old. I don't know if he's still living or not, but I had seen him on some documentary. With his he lost all of his personal memory, but he can't project ahead. So you could tell him we're having dinner in 2 minutes. He has no concept of future, I have to go to dinner.
Right. There are certain cultures like that too,
Right. And so, this is very interesting. If he's the same one that I saw in that documentary, I don't know who this is.
Hopefully. I'm sure. Andrew,
you're
funny.
How would they be able to tell, Andrew?
I don't know if this is somebody Ingrid.
Good night, Ingrid.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
So, but that is a very interesting, and if he's the same one I saw in that documentary, he's an incredible pianist. Really good.
That's another thing that happens sometimes is people have a head injury and all of a sudden become like they've never even touched a piano and they can play it perfectly.
Yeah.
I've got a story for you guys. This will blow your mind. Have you ever heard the story of Seti?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, this little English girl, and this is early at the turn of the 19th century, 1900s. This little English girl fell down the stairs and had such a severe injury they thought she was dead. And they carried her body upstairs to the bedroom, and they called the doctor, and the doctor came and said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. She's dead." Several hours later, she woke up. And when she woke up, she could speak ancient Egyptian. She could read hieroglyphics.
Oh my God, I know that story. Yes. And then she went to Egypt.
Yes,
and she actually knew where everything was.
She knew
yes, it was like a
she
past life thing. Yeah, right.
She was a priest, and she helped discover.
Right, she remembered her past life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God, what?
Yeah, I know that story.
Yeah, and people were saying, it seems like I just saw something about that. Recently.
It was on Ancient Aliens
they're like,
too.
oh, she's. Maybe that's what it was. Then what a crock, until she goes out there and she's knew everything.
Right, and she knew where everything was, and she helped the archaeologists find all kinds of stuff.
Right. Some archaeologist at Cambridge or someplace said, when she was like 16 or 17, said this kid knows more than most, professional academics, and took her under his wing, and she became like a really respected archaeological expert with no real formal training.
That's wild.
See, well, that's kind of the thing, like you were talking about, Denise, where you have like this lower memory that merges into the center, and then they, it really kind of helps make sense out of all of those just incredible stories. That's probably what was going on, and then when they go to the physical area where they were, it's like it enacts that lower body consciousness, like body memory or something. Where here she is in Egypt and she remembers it probably fueled that.
Maybe that's a good. I never even thought about that. I thought maybe it was a past life, but you may be right. Maybe it's something on a DNA level, like something in her DNA. One of her ancestors was that person, and she remembered that. I don't know.
I think it could have been a past life, but then where you had that past life experience, if you're in the same energy area, it probably enhances it on the.
No, I think you're right. I thought it was a past life too, but that is another possibility that somehow she got into her cellular memories or something, and there was some kind of direct lifetime that she had,
like a rewired.
Yeah, right. And that's possible too. Yeah, never thought about that.
I think it's the last of these head injuries. I'm not sure. We'll find out. But this man's interesting because he had another head injury person. And then when he comes to, he doesn't remember his wife. He doesn't understand what marriages are. He doesn't, and they've had to fall in love together or whatever. And I know when I floated in and on that stuff too, it's like, I didn't understand anything on Earth. It made absolutely no sense to me.
I can't imagine.
Except for my tribe. That did.
Your tribe.
Probably because probably had that DNA, that lower consciousness, merged with it or something, muscle memory.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, what is very strange, probably meditation has helped. And then the other thing that really kind of brought some of my memory back, and this is going to sound completely insane, because I don't know if there's any studies about it. It was after COVID when I got the shot.
Yeah.
My memory started coming back.
That's
I
weird.
can listen to music again, because what had happened with the brain injury, and I was with this group of Iraq veterans, and this guy, he was Paul, and it was so interesting because he had the same thing. He and his wife, they were from Chicago, and their whole thing before he got shipped off to Iraq was music. They were really into music, and when he came back, he couldn't handle it anymore because he heard the bass on one side and the other stuff on the other. And I had that too. And I would fly off into a rage because it's like, you can't.
That's an asynchronizing brain thing. There's actually, right. There actually is like a technology, like it's some kind of a machine, like my friend of mine told me about, that actually helps your brain to integrate that again. I think it's for that purpose for people with PTSD and other brain injuries. But it's a newish kind of technology. But it sounds like that's what was going on there.
What was so stupid is that I have no idea why that is. But after I had the COVID shot, and I got really sick from it because I had COVID before when they weren't even calling it COVID then.
Right.
But I had the shot. And then all of a sudden, my memory started coming back, which makes no sense at all.
It does.
It does?
Well, sure.
And it was like, now I can listen to music again.
That's interesting.
I'm not any kind of scientist, but in a really general way, when you get a vaccine, it stimulates your autoimmune response, your immune system, and therefore your autoimmune system, and those sorts of biochemical processes can cause things like lupus and
but yeah, I guess it could go the other way too.
MS.
Yeah.
You know,
right, but it could go that way where your brain starts to heal itself or something too.
Right. Why not? I mean, I've seen people with strokes come out of strokes, not know who they were, not recognize faces, not remember words, open their mouth to say something and the wrong word comes out.
Right. My mom has that. Yeah.
But and eventually recover. The brain is very plastic.
Like, I had a stroke when I had my daughter.
Place will rewire. It's
incredible. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Nothing about the brain would ever surprise me, and you should just be you're so lucky. You're so lucky that.
Well, I am. I'm glad that it did, but it was really quite remarkable to me that would happen.
Yeah, that is weird.
Now this one, when you're talking,
go get another COVID shot. You know, God knows what might.
Oh, I've had 2, and they're enough because they make me really sick. They're like worse. Although the first COVID was really awful to deal with, the second one was nothing. But
yeah.
Okay, so this guy, he was a physician. It's in the NIH. They studied this one because after his brain, now he couldn't find like a self-identity. So it was like, we might have a call. Okay, now I don't know how to do it anymore. Let's see.
I have to go, I think, pretty soon.
Be somebody calling for a pizza.
Hey, you're on the show.
Hello.
Can you guys hear?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I don't know if this is.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, it's Andrew.
Can you guys hear?
I knew it.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrew.
Okay, they can hear. So anyway, thanks for calling. Did you have a comment?
I just had Andrew D'Angelo.
Hey, Andrew.
I just had thank you. Yeah, I just had literally brain surgery, and they removed my right frontal lobe.
Oh my God! Wow.
And I'm just curious, like the doctors keep asking me if I noticed any personality changes, because that's where your personality is in your right frontal lobe.
Wow.
How can I have a perception of my own personality? I hope I have.
Can't hear him.
How would one perceive oneself before brain surgery can happen? Well, I noticed when I sit by myself that I have personality.
I can't hear him.
What?
It's hard to hear you, Andrew.
He's calling.
You said when you sit by yourself, what happens? Oh, I can't. Now it's gone. I can't hear him at all. Oh, that sucks. Because that sounded really interesting.
Yeah.
Hey.
He's calling from Germany, and
Oh, that might be part of the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, and there's a delay too, or something was going on too.
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
He sound good though. He sounds strong.
Yeah.
He's still undergoing treatment. So.
Wow.
I know.
That's amazing.
No. Can you guys hear?
No. Can't hear him.
Can you guys hear?
No.
Oh man, we're having some sound issue here. I can hear you, but they can't.
Right. Can you tell us what he said maybe and just paraphrase it?
Pass it on.
What was he saying, Deborah?
What about
No.
Can you guys
I can hear a little bit, but not enough to understand.
I can't hear either, sir.
Fragments.
Can you
fragments
call us
of
back
words.
maybe next week? Because we'll pick this up next week again.
Yeah, that'd be good. And maybe we could figure out the problem with the phone. Yeah.
Email me, Andrew.
Yeah, email Irish, email Helen or me, and maybe we could read, if you can't, at least we could read it on the air if we can't hear it.
Yeah.
Right. Or come back next week because Denise has to go and we'll pick this up the same show next week. How's that?
Yeah.
I appreciate
really
you calling. It could
interesting.
be on our end because we keep on my end here because we've had some electric problems
We're
with
having
a storm coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I apologize for that.
The world is in an uproar.
Right. But who is this? I didn't even catch the name.
It's
Andrew. His name's Andrew.
Angelo.
Andrew, if you could call us next week, we'd love to, or contact them.
Or go on the link so you can become in this
He
with
could be
us.
a special guest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because we'd like to talk about this. This is a very
Yes.
important subject. So
Yeah, it is. Oh,
Oh.
okay. He's gone now.
He hung up.
Well, yeah, I have to go soon.
Okay.
But
all right.
yeah. Oh, there he is again.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that's better. It's not the same.
It's
Something
it's
going
not
on.
really working here. Tell you what, please call us next week or join by video. We could have you as a guest. I don't know if you can hear me. This is Deborah. Something is going on. Okay, it could be from the phone, from the power thing, but they can't hear. Something's going on. We've got a storm going on where I live and where we host. But there's a video link. We'd love to have you as a guest if you're willing.
That'd be great.
That'd be fun.
Up next Wednesday.
Come at the same time next Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay, please do that. That would be great.
That's great.
He
That's
took
great.
my name in vain, didn't he?
And thank you so much for calling. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank you,
Andrew.
Andrew. We finally get a call and something's going on. So
Well, but that's good. I mean, we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll have a chance to figure it out.
On my mind because I was thinking quite a bit while we were talking. He had a near-death experience.
I would like to hear it. Yeah.
and so this is someone you know, Helen?
Yeah, he came on.
Okay.
It was funny. I was telling people, okay, I'm going to do near-death experiences. I did a book on it, and he got in touch with me, and he said, "You want to hear about my near-death experience?" And he sent me a photograph of his sutures to prove that he wasn't just some random weirdo,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Helen, if you're in touch with him, can you have him give him the info for?
Yeah, give him the info.
Yes.
Email him. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
That'd be
because we're at an hour and a half already. I didn't.
Yeah, and I
realize
gotta go.
This is
Yeah.
such a fascinating discussion.
We should talk about this for a few more times, I think, because this is a very big
Right.
subject.
And so, Andrew, thank you so much for calling. I'm really something's going on here. I'll test
That's
it
okay.
this
He'll
week.
be our
too.
special guest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
So
good.
we'll love to have you because this is very interesting. So, well, and oops, let me see how I can turn this off. So for Helen and Denise, I want to thank you both very much.
Thank you, Deborah.
I love
Deborah.
meeting with you guys. This is
Same here.
I
It's
like
so
going
fun.
into the real deep kind of meaning of life kind of questions.
Same. I
And
love
so-
it. Yeah, I do
so
too. I wish I
appreciate
had
this
to
so
go.
much.
It's rare to
Well-
find people with whom you can talk about these things and they don't get all stressed out about
Right.
it. So, yeah.
And
True.
so everybody who has joined us for the show now, I want to thank you for being
Yes.
here. So we'll be here again next Wednesday, same time, same place. And Andrew, we
Pat.
look forward to meeting you. And so thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye,
All right.
everyone. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Everybody's
Thanks,
lunch.
Deborah.
Thanks so much for joining us. We love hearing your stories, so tell your friends so they can join the party. For show notes and our forum of high strangeness, visit cosmicfold.com. Remember, Cosmic Fold airs live on Wednesday and Saturday nights, so be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to know when we're on air. Thanks again and have a great evening.